Before Final Fantasy, before Breath of Fire, before the founding of the United States of America, and well before humans roamed the earth, a Japanese supercomputer from the year 2099 created and released an electronic hero and sent him back in time. A dragon warrior was born. Okay, so some of that is true, and some of it is impossible to confirm or deny, but in May of 1986, Dragon Quest did come out in Japan on the Famicom, and was later brought west to the United States as Dragon Warrior in the fall of 1989. I was 4 years old at the time of the US release, and for whatever reason, I didn't run out to Sears and purchase what would be one of the pioneers of the JRPG genre. Now, I have obviously been slacking off in the last 30 years or so since Dragon Quest's release, and I have not gotten around to playing this classic until now. It was recently released on the Nintendo Switch in September of 2019, and that's when I decided I should actually download a copy and give it a try for myself. Having grown up playing JRPGs in a dimly lit basement on the PS1, practicing being a super cool dude for all of the ladies to love, I figure it's time that I play through this piece of history and see what the genre had to offer before Final Fantasy VII squashed everyone's mind grapes into jelly. And I know some people are saying right now into their YouTube screens in a far too irrational tone, but the Switch version isn't the original, and it's not the same as the NES version, and the Lyre of Whatever was actually called the Harp of Who Cares, so it's basically a different game. And I say, calm down, Doug, it's gonna be okay. The game has some differences, and I know this going in. It looks different than it did 30 years ago, some of the names are different, but it's still undeniably Dragon Quest. It's the most accessible version of this game right now, and it's so much easier to record gameplay off of a Switch. So instead of digging out my NES and this copy of Dragon Warrior that one of my basement friends from my youth gave me, thanks Brian, and casting a magic spell to record game footage off of a 30-year-old console, mostly because I'm too lazy to figure it out, I'm just going to play the version that most people new to the game will play in 2020, okay? Now that we have either quelled Doug's fears or chased him away, let's start our journey. First off, I needed to pick my hero's name, something strong, something that would strike fear into the hearts of my digital foes, so I selected Pete. That's the name of the cat that I live with. He sits on my lap when I play video games, so he's now my main character. Pete is face to face with the king, who explains basically the entire plot of Dragon Quest in about 10 sentences. Pete is the descendant of the great hero Erdrick, who received the Sphere of Light from the Almighty Goddess. With the power of the Sphere of the Light, the world was rid of the menace that threatened it. A few years went by, and a new menace arose, the Dragon Lord, who stole the Sphere of Light and plunged the land into darkness once again. Now that's not cool, and if the Dragon Lord is allowed to persist, then the world is doomed. So, since we are related to the renowned hero Erdrick, the king tells us to go murder the Dragon Lord and reclaim the Sphere of Light to save the day. The king also offers us some pre-adventure treasure consisting of 120 gold, a torch, and a key to unlock the door to get out of the throne room. One thing the king somehow fails to mention that we learned from some town folk is that the princess is also missing, which I would have assumed would have been near the top of his list of things he'd like us to retrieve. One thing I will note right away about the Switch version of Dragon Quest is that it looks like a cell phone game, and I'm actually pretty confident it is in fact the mobile version ported over to the Switch. While the original Dragon Warrior on NES obviously isn't God's gift graphics, being 30 years old, at least the main character looks like they belong in the world they are walking around in. The Switch version's characters kind of pop out of the backgrounds and they look a little bit off. This is not the end of the world, and I eventually got used to it, but I could see if this deters people from jumping into it. So, after the king sends Pete out to assassinate the Dragon Lord, I decided to leave the castle and start chatting up the common people, with essentially no direction given other than, go kill the bad man and retrieve the magic item. This is absolutely imperative, or else you will find yourself wandering about aimlessly hoping to stumble upon the next to-do. I like games that don't hold your hand. Sometimes it's nice when a game, movie, or television show decides that you, as a media consumer, isn't a big dummy and can't comprehend, and gives you hints of what to look out for and rewards you for paying attention instead of slapping a checkpoint on a minimap. Maybe I'm weird, but I do enjoy having a notebook by my side, taking notes and writing down that some old man in a cave near the top of a map is looking for a musical instrument in exchange for a staff of rain. In fact, there are quite a few old men, or sages, hiding in caves waiting for you to bring them items in this game to verify you are indeed related to Erdrick, and then are willing to help you in your plight against the Dragon Lord. I hear rumblings about magic keys being sold in a town down south, so I make my way around the map realizing that every bridge that Pete comes across could spell almost certain doom since more powerful monsters usually lay on the other side. The bridge in Dragon Quest weeds out the weak from the strong. If you cross a bridge and the first enemy kicks your teeth in, then it's time to grind for some levels. This brings us to one of the main gameplay aspects of DQ, the battle system. It's fairly basic, but what did you expect from a 30-year-old game? There's not a huge in-depth aspect of preparation or really any underlying hidden systems. The original Pokemon games had far more depth than just fire beating plant and water beating fire and so on. Dragon Quest is mostly just using attack and the occasional heal spell. As you level up, you gain some stat boosts, and when you hit certain levels, you will also learn new spells. Glow makes it so you can free up some inventory space by not having to lug around torches, which is nice since your inventory space is actually quite small. Fizzle makes it so enemies can't cast magic in battle. I never used it, but it is there. Another useful spell you learn later on is called Zoom, which teleports you back to the castle, and that can actually be a lifesaver if you're too deep in enemy territory to make it out alive on foot. Your equipment is also a big deal in Dragon Quest, maybe a little less important than your hero's actual level, but way more useful than the strongest attack spells you can learn. It is important that when you reach a new town to go check their wares and buy the best equipment available. And you guessed it, if you don't have enough money, it's time to grind golden golems in the southeast like they're your own personal ATMs. A lot of this game is crossing bridges to encounter strong enemies, grinding for a bit until those new baddies aren't having their creepy monster way with you, and then reaching a new town. Hitting up the town's local equipment shop only to see that magic armor costs 7,700 gold, and that you only have like 2,300, and head back out and grind for gold for 45 minutes, all while watching an episode of Star Trek Voyager because you realize that you've been on season 4 for like 6 years, and Netflix keeps reminding you to continue watching it. And you know what? It's time for those brave space adventurers to make it back home.
You know, they ought to rename this place the Negative Expanse. I haven't run across anything interesting for days.
So I make my way through a cave surrounded by a harmful purple substance, which is also inhabited by a dragon behind a door that I can't open, to the town of Rimmeldor, where I find yet another old man, but this guy is selling magic keys for 12 gold. I have Pete purchase 6 of them, since that's the max amount of keys he can fit in his pockets. And we head back to the Green Dragon's swamp cave, and he crushes Pete's bones until they're a paste-like substance. Pete and I grind out some more levels. Finally, I have enough money to buy that magic armor, and I venture back into the dragon's cave, defeat his dragon face, and save the princess that the king never told us about. Now for the sake of time, we'll fast forward past a lot of roaming around, level grinding, and old man sage item gathering. Pete has reached level 20, and through chatting with townsfolk, taking notes, and some trial and error, has found the legendary Erdrick's mark, armor, and sword. The Dragon Lord's castle is the final dungeon of the game, and it's a big dumb maze that I did not like very much. By some fortunate random happenstance, I found my way through the dark brown butthole of the Dragon Lord's castle and found him hanging out in a room alone. It's time to challenge this goon to a duel. He wants us to join him, but I've learned too much from Captain Janeway to let evil prevail. If you're properly prepared for this fight, then the Dragon Lord is nothing but a nuisance and will easily fall. If you didn't collect Erdrick's armor and sword and struggled through this final dungeon only to find yourself a weak, enfeebled shell of an underdeveloped hero, then this fight may prove harder. Pete was not a weak boy, however, and the Dragon Lord was easily defeated with swift sword smacks and some tactical self-healing. There are 2 phases to this fight. One is fighting the Lord phase, and the second is the dragon-shaped phase. I found neither very hard, as I kept Pete's HP high and was at the super buff level of 21. Afterwards, Pete ripped the orb of light from the Dragon Lord's cold, dead hands and was teleported outside of the castle. The purple poison had now turned to flowers, and I thought this was a nice touch. The game does not just teleport you back to the king's castle, and I suppose I could have just walked around aimlessly forever in a world without the Dragon Lord and the Orb of Light never ending the game, but I made the executive decision and I teleported back to the castle to let the king know that the world is safe. It turns out that he was so grateful that he offered up his kingdom, but Pete refused it, stating that the only kingdom he would lead is the one he founds himself. Also, the princess asks to join Pete in his next adventure, which I'm guessing is a special scene because we saved her from the Green Dragon earlier, even though the king never even asked us to. I've heard people complain that Dragon Quest on Switch is much easier than the original, and I'm sure that's true to a point. The game still demands that you grind for levels and gold to be prepared for what's to come. I believe it's a good representation of what Dragon Quest was 30 years ago, but more palatable for today's audiences. The plot is less than enthralling, with your basic bad guy steals an important thing and you must get it back before said guy hurts the world forever. This is an extremely basic JRPG by almost all of today's standards, but it's also a looking glass into a time before Sora teamed up with Goofy and Donald to defeat the heartless monsters alongside the Beast. And it probably inspired someone to make a game where you capture animals and exploit their strengths to compete in tournaments for merit badges. In an age of loot boxes and people on whatever TikTok is, Dragon Quest is categorically not a game for everyone. But if you're a lover of JRPGs and you have a Switch, it's never been easier to visit Lightning's digital grandparents and check out the genre's roots.